Hello everyone, back at it. Just gonna sharpen this pencil and we'll keep going on this portrait. Pretty good. Okay. If you watched the live the other day, you might kind of notice that I made a little bit of changes. Made a few changes since then, so. What I want to do is make some changes here, just the hair. Where this head is. Okay, that's how we'll do it. Now, let's see. Chin is a little long. We're going to bring that up a little bit. And it might not even seem like much. I mean, it's coming up like a fraction of an inch. But it really changes a lot. Those are the things you kind of have to notice. It's those subtle changes that really make a big difference. And it's funny, the more you draw, like the more you'll start picking up those things. And other people will be like, it looks exactly the same. But it actually doesn't. And even if the people who can't really pick it out, those subtle differences, those subtle changes, they actually can. It's kind of a weird, kind of intuitive thing. They can tell the difference of something being really good and something being okay. But it's just hard for them to like know exactly what it is. Like they know that something's off, but they don't really know exactly why or how or what. Okay, let's see. bed. Now that I have a sharper pencil, I can make these lines a little bit cleaner. Putting in a little bit more detail here in the nose. And I always preach we're holding off on details, going like really big and simple and broad, and then getting a little bit more detailed, It always seems like after I start adding more detail, then I start noticing things or noticing problems and changes that I want to make. And that's part of the reason why you want to hold off on the details, the finer details, is to get things in the proper position. And then, because while you're drawing simply, you're drawing lightly, it makes it easier to change things if you need to change things during that part of the process. But sometimes it's easier to see what needs to be changed once you start adding more details. Sometimes it's just the way it goes. Okay, she's got earrings. I'm not going to add those in yet, I don't think. I'm going to start going in with values. We're going to figure that out. So she's got some very big highlighted areas, or very highlighted areas. So like right here, along this eye socket edge and into the cheekbone. Those are our brightest areas. So I think what I want to try to do is actually stay off of those areas. Ish. We'll see. Rather than like pulling graphite off with the eraser. That whole area, this whole area is pretty highlighted. This right here, So yeah, I want to try to do this really lightly because I don't want it to be outlined. And I may have to go in with the eraser and erase some stuff later, but we'll at least kind of show where these highlights are going to be. So we can stay off of them when we start adding our values here in a minute. And I'm pretty much going to put a value down over the whole thing. So I'm going to darken up some of these lines that are darker, that way we don't lose that information. And remember, when you're drawing ears, you're just trying to draw exactly what you see. It's sometimes tempting for our brains to take over, and we start drawing what we think the ear should look like. Then it kind of gets off a little bit. But if we just try to draw a little bit more like what we're looking at, starts to work out a little bit better, I think, anyway, typically. Okay, that's where we'll leave that for now. Darken up that line a little bit. Okay. So now what we'll do is we'll just lay down a value. Ideally, we want to get close to like this, but it's just going to be basically just darkening up everything. Try to stay out of those highlighted areas that we marked. I think they're kind of small enough that we might end up just pulling them out with the eraser, but that's okay. With this type of drawing, I'm not too worried about going along with the form, so like following the form with my lines. So I'm just going straight across and it's kind of flattening everything out. I'm not too worried about that right now because I am going to kind of blend all these lines together, and hopefully that most of these lines shouldn't be there anymore. And you could do this a couple different ways. You can use like some sort of blending tool. I wouldn't use a blending stump. They typically will press the graphite in so much to the paper and it kind of damages the paper a little bit. And it's hard to get much more in terms of value on top of what you've already done. You can use one of these, like a chamois, and those are good. I always just use my fingers, so. See how that just kind of blends those marks together? You don't even see the lines. It wasn't it wasn't a mistake per se to try to just leave those highlighted areas blank, but you can't really tell, which is fine. We'll just pull them out with the eraser when we get there. There you go. Now we've got our big smudge. Okay, so we've got all one value. We've got our midtones. So let's go in, and it's like, yeah, that's pretty good. So now we'll go into this area where our darker tones are. We'll just start darkening that up. This will already start to look a little bit better, a little bit more interesting after we get in these darker tones. I did forget just a little bit of detail around the eyes, which is okay because we can add that in later. But I do kind of want to add this in now. So we'll do that. And feel free to ask questions. If anybody wants to ask questions, I'll look at it and respond. You can probably tell that this eyelid fold is a lot lighter. So one of those things you really had to keep in mind is not just your overall values, but your values in your lines. So like this fold, it's a lot darker here than it is here. And overall, it's a lot darker than this one. You can almost barely even see that one. And, sometimes it's what, the type of information that you want to show. So it's not like everything has to be perfect, but it is one of those things. If you're more in control and you're making these decisions, things aren't just coming out the way that they come out without you thinking about them. Try to be mindful of what you're doing, however you do it. Okay, so let's darken up this whole area. And we'll talk a little bit about reflected light. Okay, it's a bit of a decision to leave this little area where the light is coming through on the darker side. I think we'll try it and see how that reads. Sometimes you'll have little things like that in a portrait, like a little speck of light right there. And it looks kind of interesting. You try to put it in, leave that in, and it ends up looking a little strange. Doesn't quite read the way that you want it to, or it's even maybe a little distracting. You don't have to leave those things in there if you don't want to. You have artistic license to do what you want with your drawing. Okay, so we're hitting some reflected light right now. And we also have this terminator line. So actually, let's do that. Let's focus on the terminator line right now. So this edge, right where we transition from direct light, because we've got direct light coming from this direction, and where it crosses over the form. Where that happens right over it that's like your darkest, typically going to be like your darkest areas. And you've got this like kind of darker line almost. So let's indicate that here around the nose. And you'll notice that that's not just a straight line down. Okay, kind of comes in a little bit there, or yeah, towards the inside of the face, then comes out a little bit. Like that. Okay. Good, great. Okay, so we have quite a bit of reflected light coming in towards the side of this nose. It's going to be a little bit darker than this, but we're going to leave it like that for now. And we'll darken it up later if we need to. But what we will do is right around this edge, closer it gets to the nostril, we've got a little bit of a darker area. So we're going to fill that in. But be careful because it stays light, like basically outlining the nostril edge. So we're going to leave that like that. Okay. And then we're going to try to get the range of values that are happening in the nostril. A lot of times you'll see people, they'll just fill in the nostril black. This black hole. We've got like a few different values that are happening. It's easy to just fill it in black because it's a small space. But let's try to do more than that. Okay, so we've got that, and then you've got like a little bit of a lighter value below that. That's even higher up. So this is our darker value here. Okay. And then we've got just a lighter value coming down. It's subtle things, right? It's not huge, crazy, different changes. It's just you've got roughly two values right here. I mean, you could do it. This actually, towards the right side of the nostril, it's a little bit darker. And then lighter towards the middle. And then darker here. There you go. Sometimes it is, excuse me, a little bit darker, and it's hard to see those values. And if that's how it comes across, it's not wrong to just fill that in dark. Just look for the subtle differences and things and try to indicate those as best you can. Looks like I gotta sharpen my pencil a little bit. Okay, before I get too crazy with like details and stuff here, let's kind of block this in, the whole thing, except for right there. Yeah, actually, let's just block the whole thing in with just a little bit darker value. It's not gonna be, I'm not gonna go as dark as it's gonna end up being. We're just gonna block the whole thing in. The one value. Have this go into the hair a little bit. Notice too, so here we've got the lips. So we've got it pretty much centered right here in the top lip into our shaded area, and then the bottom lip is left of that. So it's not just going to be straight down through those lips. Okay. I'm going to leave this how it is. I am actually going to change the position of it slightly. Comes out of there more. Yeah. Because this actually, her hair right here is going to give us this line because it is so much darker. So pretty high contrast between the hair there and her face. We do want to keep this line nice. Okay. And her neck as well. let's leave it like that for now. And actually, before we go on, let's sharpen this pencil a little bit more. And actually, I have to leave soon. I've got to work on a Saturday. But I do want to progress a little bit more on this thing. Before I go. Okay, so we got this side a little bit darker. Just gonna smooth this out. I want to lift. Don't want to lose this area. His eyes and more shadow too. Okay, so now you kind of get your values in starting. Like you've got your started value in more or less where you want it to be. So now you'll probably notice she's got some reflected light coming on this right cheek, her right cheek. So basically, we're just going to leave this value. This whole left side is going to be that value, and we're going to darken up the rest of it. We're also going to darken up some of the other areas that need to be darkened up so we don't exactly lose any of that information, like her eyes. Just gonna bring that out a little bit. You'll notice too, I mean, it's kind of hard to see, but the eyes have a lot more interesting information in them than just dark little circles. So try to we'll try to get some of that information in without being too busy. Show enough to hold interest, but not so much that it is distracting. It's typically my goal, what I'm thinking to myself when I'm drawing is that. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't really, and that's fine. Yeah, basically the rest of this is just, it's finding those values within the shaded area. Those indicators of form, right? Because upon first glance, this is just dark, right? And that's good. Those are good things to notice. But there's a lot of information going on in those dark areas. But yeah, it's a long process sometimes, especially when you're going like this, trying to get accurate values. I saw somebody commented and it went away. Ah. Sorry, it's not showing me your comment. What if you did an unerasable mistake in your art and you just realized after you have done rendering that part? Depends on what it is and like what you're trying to do. But if it's just not, you're not able to erase it, or you're not able to erase it well enough, you have to make a decision. Is it a mistake that is bad enough, or is it something that's, you know, distracting enough from the rest of the piece that you might just have to start over? Sometimes you just have to start over. But if you can get creative with it, and maybe you can push your values even more, and there's a way that you can kind of mask that mistake by darkening up some areas. You can always try that before you have to leave it or start over. But yeah, I've definitely abandoned my fair share of drawings because of that. And yeah, it's not a good feeling. Okay, this whole area needs to be darker, darker, darker. I'm just gonna push this a lot more. One good way of checking to see if your values are working or if they're correct is squint at your reference, squint at your drawing. If you can't even really tell that there's a separation between values, then you're not going dark enough. And then you just push it. Sorry, I'm a little more. Kind of want to match that line value. Yeah, that's good. And that's going to be even darker. But yeah, you just can't be afraid of pushing those values. Can't be afraid of going darker. And I get why. I mean, like when you first start, like it looks weird. Like this looks kind of weird. But once you start adding more detail, once you get more values in there that play with each other, that go off of each other, it starts to make a little bit more sense and starts to come together and look better. But initially, when you start putting in those darker values without, all the other information, without the other values that you're putting in, yeah, it looks kind of weird and it's a little nerve-wracking sometimes. But just gotta go for it. Have fun with it. It's fun. Drawing is fun. Okay, I'm gonna get in this eye, and then I have to go. Got some highlights, got some all kinds of stuff going on. Yeah, always be looking at the relationship between values, the kind of contrast that's going on. A lot of times if something's looking kind of weird after you've shaded it, typically just means that either that thing, that area that you shaded, needs to be darker or needs to be lighter, or the area around it needs to be darker. Right? Like, see how there's a high contrast between the edge of her iris and the white of the eye? That just needs to be darker. The white of the eye is too bright there. It needs to just go darker. This is too bright. It needs to go darker. Okay, there we go. That's where we're gonna leave off for today. But I want to thank everybody for coming on and hanging out. And I'll see you all later. Ooh. Sorry, Leo, I missed your second question. Does over-detailing ruin the proportions? No. And I think over-detailing too quickly, there's a chance of, you put that feature let's say it's the nose. You went in with details really quickly, and maybe you put that nose in the wrong spot. It just means that it's harder to change. It's also, it can be, especially in the beginner, when you're really starting off drawing portraits. It's harder sometimes to get the structure correct. And you just start throwing in details, or you're going straight into the details. Things get kind of wonky pretty quickly. But if you use simple shapes and you throw them in and you get them more or less where you think they're supposed to be, it just makes it easier for later on when you do put in the details. Okay. All right, with that, I will catch you all on the flip side. See ya later.